You're moving single file through the Louisiana swamp at Rougarou 230, water up to your chest, weapon held high, trying not to think about the cottonmouth that just brushed your leg. Somewhere behind you, a Green Beret ODA is hunting something the briefing officer only referred to as the asset. No name, no photo, just a grid, a containment protocol, and the warning. Do not attempt lethal force unless you have no choice. It may not stay dead. This isn't Vietnam. This isn't Kandahar. This is 2018, right here in the continental United States, on a training area most soldiers just call Polk or JRTC and try to forget the moment they rotate out. Fort Johnson, Louisiana. Home of the Joint Readiness Training Center, 280,000 acres of pine forest, red clay, and some of the densest swamp in the lower 48. The Army has owned this ground since 1941. The local Cajun families will tell you something else owned it a lot longer. Over the last 70 years, soldiers have reported seeing things in those woods and wetlands that don't show up on any thermal scope. Tall, thin figures that vanish when you traverse your weapon light. Red eyes reflecting above the waterline with no heat signature. Entire patrols going missing for hours and coming back speaking in unison, like something rewrote their muscle memory. Most of it gets chalked up to training fatigue, swamp gas, or too much rip it and dip. But every once in a while, a report climbs high enough that it lands on a desk at Pope Air Force Base, or MacDill, or some unmarked building in Crystal City. And when that happens, they don't send MPs. They send the people you call when the problem is already wearing your uniform and won't respond to commands. Tonight, you're going to hear directly from members of 3rd Special Forces Group who, in late 2018, were read on to a classified retrieval operation targeting what the case file simply calls Entity L19, Rougarou, Skunk Ape, Swamp Stalker. The locals have 100 names. The Army only needed one recoverable. What you're about to hear has never been released in full. Names, dates, and some locations have been changed or sanitized. Chapter 1. The barracks that remembered my name is Staff Sergeant Daniel LeBlanc, 18C with 3rd Special Forces Group, ODA 3316. People call me Cajun because I'm from Houma and still say share when I'm drunk or pissed off. I grew up hearing my mama's stories about the Rougarou that drags sinners into the bayou on full moon nights. I always figured they were just bedtime threats to keep kids from sneaking out. After my first week in the transient barracks on North Fort, I wasn't so sure anymore. We had just come off a brutal JRTC rotation, 12 straight days of getting hunted by the Geronimo Op-4 in the box, sleeping in the mud, eating cold MREs while mosquitoes the size of hummingbirds drained us dry. Everyone was wrecked. Half the team had trench foot bad enough to go on. Profile. When they told us we were billeting in the old 3200 block, we didn't complain. A real mattress sounded like heaven. Barracks 30201 was a 1950s concrete tomb on the far end of North Fort, the kind of place the Army keeps open because demolition costs more than letting it rot. Peeling green paint, asbestos floor tiles curling at the edges, the permanent stench of mold and wintergreen skull baked into the walls. The whole building was supposed to be empty, except for us. 12 operators, 4 bays, 1 common area with a busted couch that smelled like despair and rip it. I took the last room on the left because it had the only window unit that still blew cold. First night in, I passed out hard around 2200 still wearing my wet socks. Woke up a few hours later needing to piss. Hall was dark except for the red glow of the exit sign. I stepped out of my room and the temperature dropped so fast my breath fogged in Louisiana in July. That's not normal. Then I heard the footsteps. Regulation cadence, heel toe, coming down the hallway toward me. But wet. Like someone just walked straight out of the swamp without bothering to empty their boots. I reached for my rifle out of habit, then remembered it was locked in the arms room. All I had was a folder clipped to my pocket. The footsteps stopped right outside my door. I stood frozen in PT shorts, heart hammering. The door across from mine, the one welded shut since the 70s according to the armorer, started rattling in its frame. Not knocking, rattling, like something on the other side was testing how strong the welds really were. Then a voice, low, male, thick Cajun accent layered under English the way only the real old ones speak. LeBlanc, you weren't supposed to come back here, Cher. My blood turned to ice. It knew my name. It knew the accent. My mama's accent. I flicked on my phone light. Empty hallway. Door still rattling. I took one step forward and every fluorescent tube in the building slammed on at once. Harsh white. Blinding. The rattling stopped. Temperature shot back up so fast I started sweating through my shirt. I stood there a solid minute, waiting for my pulse to come down. Then I heard Master Sergeant Hicks from the far bay, voice rough with sleep. "Cajun, quit screwing around and go back to bed. Layout at 5:30. I never told him what I heard. Figured it was lack of sleep, swamp funk, whatever. Soldiers see weird shit when we're smoked. We write it off and drive on. 2 nights later, the entire team woke up to the fire alarm screaming at 0347. We spilled into the hallway in boxers and shower shoes expecting smoke. Nothing. Just that same wet swamp water and gun oil smell hanging in the air. The alarm cut off by itself. When we went back inside, every wall locker in the bay was standing wide open. Civilian clothes laid out on the floor in perfect order. Left boot, right boot, jeans folded, belt coiled, t-shirt squared away. Like someone was doing. A layout for a soldier who wasn't there. Hicks stared at it for a long time, jaw working his dip. "This ain't heat stroke," he finally said. That was the first time any of us admitted out loud that something was wrong with Barracks 3201. We still had no idea how wrong it was about to get. Chapter 2. The briefing that wasn't on any server. 3 days after the wall locker incident, Hicks got a call on his battalion-issued cell while we were scrubbing the pine sap off our rifles in the motor pool. He listened for maybe 10 seconds, face going hard, then looked at me and Reyes. "SF. Service Alphas 1400. Bring your souls." No explanation, no email in global, just that. We walked into the old Intel building behind the PX, the one with the faded civil defense fallout shelter signs and the original 1950s tile that still has the little radiation trefoil symbols. The SKF door hissed shut behind us like a bank vault. Inside were 3 people we had never seen before and never wanted to see again. First was a full bird colonel, no name tape, no branch insignia, just a set of jump wings, so old they looked hand-forged. Second was a civilian in a JCPenney suit that didn't fit, sweating through his shirt even though the room was cold. Third was a woman in AB use with a DIA badge clipped upside down and eyes that looked like she hadn't slept since Benghazi. The colonel didn't sit. He stood at the head of the table like he was briefing a combat patrol. "Gentlemen, in about 5 minutes, you're going to be read into a program that does not exist above top secret, yours SI, no foreign. If you repeat anything you hear in this room without my direct permission, you will vanish so completely, your own mothers will forget you had a name. Nod if that's clear." We nodded. He clicked a remote. The screen lit up with thermal drone footage shot from a RQ-11 Raven. Something tall, easily 7 or 8 feet, moving upright through the cypress and tupelo west of Pisan Ridge. No heat signature, just a black void colder than the surrounding air. It pauses, turns its head toward the drone like it hears the prop, then steps sideways into a tree, and is gone. The civilian cleared his throat, voice shaking. That was taken 72 hours ago. We've had 3 confirmed sightings in the last month, all within 5 clicks of where the 509th Parachute Infantry Regiment conducted what they called containment operations in 1944. Hicks didn't blink. "Containment operations, sir?" The colonel ignored him and kept talking. "Your team is being attached to a joint task force effective immediately. Your cover story is a routine night land nav package in the Pisan Ridge Wildlife Management Area. Your actual task is live capture of Entity L-19, non-lethal preferred. You will draw experimental tranquilizer rounds loaded with a ketamine analog and cold iron flechettes." "Yes, I said cold iron. Questions later." Reyes leaned forward. "Colonel, with respect, why Green Berets? Why not the activity or one of the Tier 1 elements?" The DIA woman answered, voice flat. "Because it only gets bold when conventional units are massed in the training area. The bigger the footprint, the more it feeds. But small, high-speed teams, it watches, it studies, and when it's ready, it wears one of you home." She clicked to the next slide. A black and white photograph, 1954. A platoon from the 82nd Airborne in front of Barracks 3201. Every face scratched out with what looked like claw marks. At the edge of the frame, barely visible, a tall figure with arms too long for its body. "Your barracks," she said. "Built on the site of a Civil War POW stockade. Before that, a Tunica burial mound. Before that, something older. Every time the Army billets exhausted soldiers in that building, the activity spikes. Sleep deprivation, isolation, stress. Those are the keys it uses to turn the lock." Hicks chewed on that for a second, then asked the question we all wanted answered. "What exactly are we going after, ma'am?" The colonel met his eyes. "Local Cajuns call it the Rougarou. We call it a non-terrestrial biological entity with aggressive mimetic properties. It imitates the dead. It knows your guilt. And right now, it's wearing the face of Staff Sergeant Etienne LeBlanc, 509th PIR, who was killed in 1944 trying to bury it the first time." He let that hang in the air like smoke. I felt the room tilt. Etienne LeBlanc, my grandfather's little brother, the uncle I never met because he died before I was born. The family story was he stepped on a German mine in France. Turns out the Army lied. The colonel closed the folder. "You step off tonight at 2200. No fire support. No QRF closer than 40 mics. If you are compromised, we erase the mission and everyone on it. Any questions?" I had one. "Sir, what if we can't take it alive?" He looked straight at me. "Then you finish what your great-uncle started, Sergeant. You put it back in the ground, and you make damn sure it stays there." Chapter 3. The Night the Swamp Breathed. We launched at 2200 from a dirt ramp on the backside of Alligator Lake. Two black Zodiacs with suppressed Yamaha 40s, no lights, no markings. 12 operators plus the DIA woman who told us to call her Gravedigger. She carried a sawed-off Remington 870 loaded with alternating rock salt and hand-cast silver buckshot like it was the most normal thing in the world. The air was thick enough to chew, 90-plus degrees with humidity so high your eyeballs felt wet. By the time we killed the engines and pulled into the reeds, every man was soaked through with sweat and swamp water. We went static for 10 mics listening to the night settle. Frogs, cicadas, the occasional gator bellowing somewhere deep. Standard Louisiana soundtrack. Hicks set the patrol order. I had point with the FLIR. Reyes on drag with the 320 in case we had to go loud. Gravedigger walked slack, right behind Hicks, calm as if she were on a Sunday stroll. We moved slow, maybe 10 meters every 5 minutes, halting to listen. The swamp was alive, but it felt like it was holding its breath around us. Then everything went dead quiet. Not quiet. Dead. Frogs cut off mid-croak. Cicadas just stopped. Even the mosquitoes quit landing. The only sound was 12 grown men trying not to breathe too loud. I raised a closed fist. Team froze. On thermal 30 meters to my 10 o'clock, a cold spot the size of a man stood motionless between two cypress knees. No heat bloom, no respiration signature, just a black silhouette colder than the water around it. I keyed the MBITR. Voice barely a whisper. Contact left. Possible L19. Hicks slid up beside me, looked through his PVS 31s. Nothing. He shook his head. I looked again. Still there. The cold spot started walking toward us, slow, deliberate, not disturbing a single blade of sawgrass. Gravedigger's voice came over the net, soft and steady. "Do not make eye contact. Do not say its name. If it speaks your name, you have 8 to 10 seconds before it locks on. Look away, or you're done." It stopped 5 meters out. The smell hit me then. Wet dog, cordite, old blood, and something sweet, like rotting magnolia blossoms. My stomach flipped. Then it spoke. My voice. My exact voice. But older, rougher, like a man who'd screamed himself raw in 1944. "Daniel, why'd you let me drown in that canal, Cher?" My knees almost buckled. My little brother Etienne, real Etienne, drowned when we were kids. I was supposed to be watching him. I looked away for 10 seconds. 10 seconds. I was 12 years old, and I've carried that weight every day since. Hicks grabbed my carrier, yanked me back hard. "Eyes on me, LeBlanc. That ain't him." The thing laughed, wet, bubbling, like it was drowning and enjoying it. Reyes did the only thing that made sense. He put a 40-millimeter cold iron sponge round square into its center mass from 15 meters. The round hung in the air 6 inches from its chest, spinning slowly, then dropped straight down into the mud like someone hit pause. It smiled with my mouth, but the teeth were wrong. Too many. Too sharp. Then every dead man we ever lost started talking inside our skulls at once. Mothers, teammates, dogs, every voice you never wanted to hear again, all layered on top of each other, telling you exactly how you failed them. The swamp exhaled. Black water exploded upward in columns. Pale hands broke the surface. Dozens of them, waterlogged, some still wearing faded green wool sleeves and wedding bands, grabbing ankles, wrists, throats. Doc Thibodeau went under screaming. Both legs yanked straight down so fast his NVGs floated to the surface still glowing. Hicks was already bounding us back, voice cutting through the chaos. Bound back. Rally point Bravo. Move! I fired full auto into the water until the bolt locked. Didn't matter. The hands kept coming. Gravedigger pumped her 870 rock salt blast, lighting up the night in orange muzzle flashes. Wherever the salt hit, the hands smoked and recoiled. Cold iron and faith, boys. That's all that works. 20 meters to my left, Reyes was swinging his .320 like a baseball bat, trying to get back to the main body. I saw it step out of the tree line behind him, my face, my eyes, but the pupils were black from corner to corner. Reyes, 6 o'clock. He spun. Too late. It placed one hand on his shoulder, gentle, almost tender, and whispered something I couldn't hear over the gunfire and screaming. Reyes dropped the grenade launcher, went to his knees in the chest-deep water, and started sobbing like a child who just realized the world is broken. Then he put his own M18 to his temple. I tackled him sideways before he could pull the trigger. We both went under. Underwater was worse. Faces pressed against my mask. Soldiers in rotting wool uniforms, some still wearing steel pots. Mouths open in silent screams. One had a faded 509th GFPG patch on his shoulder. Something cold and strong locked around my ankle and dragged me deeper. Pressure crushed my ears. Lungs started burning. Then a warm hand grabbed my wrist and hauled me up. I broke the surface choking. Hicks had a tow rope around his waist and was dragging me toward the Zodiac like I weighed nothing. Behind us, Reyes stood chest-deep, perfectly still, staring at the thing, wearing my face. It leaned in and kissed his forehead, soft as a mother. Reyes smiled, turned, and started walking deeper into the swamp. We screamed his name until our voices shredded. He never looked back. And the swamp kept breathing. Chapter 4. The night we lost Reyes, they came up through the black mud like roots looking for sunlight. Pale, bloated, some still in rotted wool sleeves with rank chevrons long turned green. They didn't grab to kill. They grabbed to hold, to remind. One wrapped around my left wrist, and I felt it immediately. My brother Etienne's fingers, small, cold, exactly the way they were the last time I touched him when they pulled him out of the canal. I screamed underwater. Bubbles exploded out of me. The hand squeezed once, almost gentle, then let go. Hicks was roaring somewhere above the surface, voice raw. Bounding, bounding, get to the boats. I broke the surface, choking on swamp water and cordite. Suppressed rounds snapped overhead, green tracers from the saw cutting low across the water. Every time a tracer hit a hand, it flared white and dissolved like salt in a wound, but 10 more took its place. Doc Thibodeau was gone. Just his NVG's floating lens up, still glowing that sick green. I saw his plate carrier being dragged under by at least 6 arms, slow and deliberate, like the swamp wanted to be sure he felt every second. Gravedigger moved through it all like she was born for this. She pumped the 870 dry, dropped the empty mag, slammed in another, and kept firing rock salt and silver. Each blast carved a hole in the dark, and the hands recoiled, smoking. "Stay in the salt rings," she yelled. "Iron and faith, damn it! Move!" We bounded back in pairs, one man firing while the other hauled ass through knee-deep water. The cold spot, the thing wearing my face, just watched from the tree line. It didn't need to hurry. The swamp was doing its work. Reyes was 25 meters to my left, alone, the .320 dangling from its sling. He had stopped shooting, stopped moving. He was staring at the Rougarou like it was the only real thing he'd ever seen. I keyed the mic. "Reyes, fall back, brother, fall back." He didn't answer. The thing stepped out of the shadows and walked across the top of the water. Not through it, across it, like the surface was glass. Every footfall left a perfect black print that filled with blood. It stopped behind Reyes and placed both hands on his shoulders. Long fingers, too many joints, nails black and sharp. It leaned down and whispered something right into his ear. Reyes dropped to his knees. The grenade launcher fell from his hands and sank without a splash. He started crying. big, broken sobs that carried over the gunfire. I had known the man for 6 years. I had never once seen him cry, not when his wife left, not when we lost half our terp team in Wardak. Never. He pulled his M18 with shaking hands and pressed the muzzle under his chin. I was moving before I thought. I crashed through the water, shoulder checked him sideways just as his thumb whitened on the trigger. The round went into the sky. We both went under. Underwater, the dead closed in, faces inches from my mask, eyes milk white, mouths working like they were trying to tell me something important. One still had a lit cigarette clamped between gray lips, the cherry glowing red in the black water. Something iron hard locked around my ankle and pulled. My knee hyperextended. I felt the pop. Pain flared white hot. Then Hicks was there again. He had tied a tow rope to his carrier and was hauling me up like a hooked catfish. I broke the surface gasping. "LeBlanc, stay with me." I looked back. Reyes was standing again. The pistol hung loose at his side. The Rougarou stood behind him, one hand resting on top of his head, like a priest giving absolution. It leaned in and kissed Reyes on the forehead, slow, deliberate, the way my mama used to when we had fever dreams. Reyes smiled, a real smile, peaceful, like every weight he'd ever carried just floated off his shoulders and sank into the swamp. Then he turned and started walking west, deeper into the darkness, boots barely making ripples. The hands in the water reached up, not to grab him, but to guide him. Gentle, loving. We screamed his name until our throats bled. He never turned around. The last I saw of Sergeant First Class Antonio Reyes was his silhouette disappearing between the cypress knees, the Rougarou walking beside him like an old friend come to bring him home. Behind us, the swamp closed ranks. The hands sank. The water went still. The frogs and cicadas started up again like someone flipped a switch. We reached the Zodiacs with 6 men instead of 12, and somewhere out in the dark, something wearing Reyes boots started whistling an old Cajun lullaby my mother used to sing, the same one it used on me the first night in Barracks 3201. It was learning. Chapter 5. Containment. We hit the exfil LZ at first light, 2 Zodiacs limping in with one engine coughing black smoke and the other half swamped. I counted 5 of us left. Hicks, me, Gravedigger, a kid from the B team whose name I never caught, and our 18D who was shaking so bad he couldn't get the tourniquet on his own leg. 6 missing. No blood trail, no bodies, just gone. The containment team was already waiting. No markings, no hello. Black Suburbans, a flatbed with a steel shipping container welded to it, and 8 guys in level A suits that made them look like ghosts in the morning mist. One of them carried what looked like a medieval bear trap on wheels. Iron, thick chains, runes etched deep enough to cast shadows. Gravedigger walked straight to the senior suit and started talking in low, fast bursts. I caught fragments. Full manifestation. Mimetic breach. One carrier still mobile. The suit nodded once and made a circling motion with his gloved hand. The rest fanned out with detectors that screamed the second they crossed the waterline. They found Reyes 3 hours later. He was sitting cross-legged on a dry hummock, a kilometer deeper than any of us had gone. Uniform perfect, rifle across his lap like he was pulling security. Eyes wide open, smiling the kind of smile you only see on dead men who died happy. He was humming that same lullaby, soft, off-key, the one my mama sang when the fever was high and the night wouldn't end. When the containment guys moved in, he didn't resist, just raised both hands, palms up, like a child waiting to be picked up. They slapped on iron manacles forged from old railroad spikes. The second the metal touched his skin, the smile faltered, just for a heartbeat, and I saw Reyes in there, my friend, terrified, screaming behind his own eyes. Then the smile came back wider, and the thing wearing him started singing louder. They sedated him with enough ketamine and midazolam to drop a horse. 4 guys lifted him into the iron box on the flatbed. Before they closed the lid, Reyes turned his head, looked straight at me, and spoke in my little brother's drowned voice. "Tell Mama I finally came home, Daniel." Then the lid slammed. The runes flared dull red. The singing stopped. We were debriefed in a tent that smelled of diesel and bleach. They took our rifles, our plates, even our dog tags for decontamination. A colonel I didn't recognize read from a prepared script. Accidental drowning during night waterborne ops. Hostile local with history of mental illness, Reyes. Case vased for psych eval. We all signed the NDAs with pens that still had the plastic wrap on them. My hand shook so bad, the signature looked like a child's. 2 weeks later, they bulldozed Barracks 3201. I watched from the tree line while cats and dozers tore the building down to the slab. They spread rock salt and quicklime so thick the ground looked like it had snowed in August. Then they poured a new foundation and built a shiny gym over the top. Grand opening had a ribbon cutting and everything. First night the gym was open, the lights flickered in Rougarou 230. Every light at once. The kid pulling staff duty that night found wet boot prints walking the length of the basketball court, heel-toe, regulation cadence, leading straight into a cinder block wall that used to be my old room. He put in his transfer packet the next morning. They never found the other 5. Official story is they're still listed as drowned, bodies not recovered. Sometimes, when the JRTC rotations are heavy and the box is full of tired kids who don't know any better, their names pop back up on the morning roster. Location: North Fort, Building 3201. Status: present. I checked once. The building number doesn't exist anymore, but the roster doesn't lie. The swamp keeps what it takes. And it's still hungry. Chapter 6. The Ones Who Stayed Behind. I left 3rd Group in 2021. Took a soft job at the Q course, teaching land nav to wide-eyed cherries who still thought war was a video game. Thought distance and daylight would scrub the swamp off me. It didn't. Some nights I wake up tasting black water and magnolia rot. Some mornings I check my phone and see 6 new emails from old CAC addresses that were deleted years ago. Subject line always blank, body always the same. A single grid coordinate inside Pisan Ridge and the words, "Come get us, Cajun." I never reply. I just delete the accounts and change my password again. Last year, I went home to Huma for the first time since the swamp. My mama was waiting on the porch when I pulled up, 93 years old, still rocking in the same cypress chair, rosary clicking through her fingers like 240 rounds on a belt feed. She didn't hug me, just looked me over slow and said, "He still asks about you, Daniel." I didn't have to ask who. She reached into her apron pocket and pulled out a rosary made from melted down railroad spikes, black iron beads linked with baling wire. The crucifix was a bent horseshoe nail. She pressed it into my hand and closed my fingers around it hard enough to leave bruises. "Cold iron and faith," she said. "Only 2 things ever kept it in the ground." I still carry it, left cargo pocket every day. It's worn smooth now from my thumb, rubbing the same bead when the dreams get loud. I tried to find Reyes once, took leave, drove to Leavenworth because that's where the rumor mill said they kept the ones who came back wrong. Walked the visitor's room in my Class A's with a manila. Folder full of forged orders. The MP at the desk just looked at my ID, looked at his screen, and shook his head. "No inmate by that name, Sergeant. Never was." I asked to see the roster anyway. He turned the monitor so I could read it myself. Every block that should have had a name just showed the same 8 characters. L19, Reyes. Status active. Location redacted. I stopped asking after that. The others, Thibodeau, the B-team kid, all of them show up the same way. Once a year, like clockwork, their names reappear on the global address list for exactly 24 hours. Duty location always lists JRTC North Fort. Then they vanish again. Some of the younger instructors at Bragg think it's a glitch. Old-timers just look away when the subject comes up. Last thing Gravedigger ever told me in that Waffle House parking lot outside Alexandria was that L19 wasn't unique. She said there's one under every major training area where the Army has spilled enough blood and grief to season the ground. Bragg has its own. Drum, Irwin, they're all chained the same way, with iron with salt, and with the promise that we'll keep feeding them fresh meat every rotation. She said the real reason they always tap special forces for these jobs is simple. We're already broken, easier to wear. I still check dark hallways for wet footprints. Still sleep with the iron rosary wrapped around my fist. Still flinch when someone calls me Cher in the right accent. Because I know what's waiting out there in the dark between the cypress knees. It's patient. It's got my face. And every time a new ODA ships down to JRTC, it smiles a little wider because it knows some of them won't be leaving the box the same way they came in, and the swamp always keeps the ones it loves. Chapter 7. What the Swamp Keeps. I met Gravedigger one last time in 2020 in a Waffle House off I-49 at 0300. She looked like death warmed over, hair gone gray at the temples, eyes sunken, hands shaking so bad she couldn't get the coffee to her mouth without spilling. She didn't say hello, just slid a black USB drive across the table between the sugar packets and the syrup. "Burn after reading," she said. Her voice sounded like gravel soaked in bourbon. I asked where she'd been. She laughed once. "Short and ugly. Where they send people who know too much and can't be allowed to talk. Same place they'll send you if you ever open your mouth." The drive had one file. A scanned 1944 after-action report. 509th Parachute Infantry Regiment, stamped eyes only in red that had faded to rust. 38 pages of typed text and shaky handwriting. The last page was a single paragraph in fountain pen ink, written by a Captain Marcel Leblanc, my great-uncle, the one the family was told stepped on a shoe mine in Normandy. It read, "We did not kill it. We only wounded it and buried it shallow. It will wait for the next war, and the next, and the next. It feeds on regret, the way we feed on food. One day the army will run out of iron and salt, and tired men willing to lie for it. On that day, it will walk out wearing every face we ever failed. God forgive us, because it never will." Underneath, in different ink, someone else had added years later, 1954, stirred again. 1972, fed. 1991, fed. 2003, fed. 2018, feeding. That was the last line. I drove to the parking lot, doused the drive in lighter fluid, and watched it melt on the asphalt. The plastic bubbled black and smelled like the swamp. Gravedigger was already gone. Left $20 under her plate and walked out into the rain without looking back. I still think about Reyes sometimes. Wonder if he's out there right now, sitting on that same hummock, humming that lullaby, waiting for the next team to get too tired, too broken, too full of guilt for the thing to slip inside their skin like a second uniform. Maybe he's pulling staff duty in the new gym at Rougarou 230. Boots dripping, leaving wet prints that stop at a wall that isn't there anymore. Maybe he's just gone. Or maybe the swamp finally gave him the peace the army never did. I don't know. All I know is every February when the new JRTC rotations start rolling in, I get the same text from an unknown Louisiana number. No words. Just a photo taken from night vision, 12 fresh faces in the North Fort chow line, laughing, alive, innocent. And in the background, barely visible in the shadows under the pine trees, a tall figure wearing my face, smiling with too many teeth. The message always deletes itself 30 seconds later, but I still see it when I close my eyes. The swamp keeps what it takes, and it's never finished taking.